presentation on new modules. My name is Sonny Clover. First, let's just start with what's going to happen here today. I'll start with a little bit of an introduction on the team and such. Then I'll enter of why do we want to be doing anything with modules, what's our vision for it, what's our ultimate goal and all that. Then we'll sort of get into the bolts and nuts of it, of what actually we're gonna do in the short and long term. And in part 3, we'll look at the short-term fruits, which is basically what is happening in Inferno, and then a short discussion on the future. So this is the team that is working on this feature. And just to give maybe a brief more introduction to myself, I haven't been involved with the EVE project for 5 years now. I started at CCP in 1999, but I've been for the last five years working on World of Darkness, but recently returned to EVE. So let's just start with the theory discussion of why this is something that we are interested in doing. And this slide is not happening as it should be. It should come at one bullet point at a time, but okay, we'll just go through it anyway. So the three main sources of inspiration from EVE, Elite and Ultima Online, are ones that people probably know about and see very clearly what the influence is, but maybe the influence of or inspiration from Magic the Gathering is the collectible card game is less clear. But the fating system is basically based on or inspired by Magic the Gathering, where ships are like decks and modules are individual cards. Of course, it's not clear cut. Of course, it's different media and all that. So in Magic the Gathering, they, of course, release new cards on a regular basis to keep the game fresh. And this basically was the original intent for EVE, but we sort of never maybe really went through with it fully. And what we want to look at now is if it's something that we can go back to, if we can sort of make that root vision bloom again. So, of course, as you know, flying in your ship is basically the vehicle to most of the gameplay you do in the game. Not all, of course, if you're an industrialist or doing something social or political, but for most other activities, that's the vehicle that you use for it, and so any changes to it will have great ramifications for every player. So we've mainly sort of combated the stagnation which we don't want to happen by adding new ships every now and then and some new module work and so on. But the key thing here is that in a sense, sort of looking at it in hindsight, the golden age of new modules and similar can be said to be from 2003 to 2006. Their most expansions were mostly driven by new ships, new modules and such. But at that time, we sort of, in 2006, we sort of gradually started to, as CCP grew in size and the resources, we became more, it became easier for us to work on bigger features, and it can be said maybe that we sort of lost ourselves in that a little bit, which culminated last year with everything that happened then. And now it's maybe time to go back to some of the core issues or core things that make Eve so great. And that's what we are looking into right now. Now it's coming one at a time. That's good. So to combat this stagnation, the key thing there is what I like to call shaking the ant farm. And if we say the ant farm is a metaphor for sort of the tactical landscape in the game, then with time, as players explore the tactical landscape more and more, it becomes more and more firm and known. And in time, if we don't shake this tactical landscape, it becomes completely stagnated, basically. And what we want to do is look into how can we shake this a little bit to sort of keep the exploration of this tactical landscape a continuous part of the game, rather than just something that is done once and then never changes again. We're not looking to completely overhaul everything and make, white, black, and left, right, or anything like that. We do believe that we don't have to go for drastic module changes to shake the tactical landscape. We also want to define the tactics and counter tactics in the game very clearly. This is basically in a good place already. I mean, we have many tactical elements like electronic warfare and cap warfare and different weapon types and all of these things. But we want to get them into sort of a rhythmic metagame shift. By that I mean that, let's say, I have a module A that is an offensive module of some sorts, and then we have a module B that is a counter to that module. If players start to use module A a lot, that is then an incentive for people to start to fit module B more to counter that. And at a certain point, there sort of is a tipping point where using module A no longer is so viable because so many people are using the countermeasures to it, and then the use of module A lessens, and then that drives the module B also to be less used because, as you well know, slot relay state is expensive and you don't want to be fitting something that is not doing good most of the time. And then at some point, starting to use module A again becomes a viable option. So that's sort of the rhythmic metagame system that we are looking into, and this can have a lot of strong benefits for those who are able to read these metagame shifts the best, both on a tactical level, of course, but also on an economic level. And if they are managed to sort of read it beforehand, they can reap massive benefits, both strategic and economic. And because what will happen is that modules start to have a relative value. In a stagnant tactical environment, modules will have a fixed value because everyone will know exactly how good or bad it is. But in a fluid metagame, that will not be the case, and something that was great 6 months ago may be not so great today, and vice versa. And both fighters and industrialists would have to try to adapt to that. There are, of course, a few things to watch out here for. One is flavor of the month, basically, where if we try to make these changes happen too fast, that means that players are constantly chasing the flavor of the month, which by itself is not terrible, but it's pretty bad in EVE because of the skill system we have. You are very locked in for a large chunk of time of what you can and cannot do. And if you spend months training for a particular tactic, you don't want to suddenly find that tactic completely useless, and so on. So these shifts have to happen slowly. Too much setup variance is also not great. By that I mean we want to make sure that the ship roles continue to be fairly fixed. That you know, if you meet a scorpion, you can be fairly certain that some sort of electronic warfare is going to happen. But you know, not that you find a scorpion that happens to be a massive drone boat or whatever. You know, we have to make sure that whatever changes we are making are not too drastic on that side also. I also want to address a little bit the question of ultimate balance. By that I mean, where we balance the system to something where we can basically just walk away from and say, yeah, there's this balance. We've now balanced the game perfectly, and we can now just, you know, never think about it again. That ultimate balance is fine for some games, but for a evolving MMO, it's not really something that you can go for, because it will just become stale and boring after a while. And another important factor, which means that ultimate balance is a myth, is that we don't want to, and we really can't, enforce fairness. Regardless of how, you know, meticulously we have tweaked the numbers to be so every module and every ship is perfectly balanced, we can never make sure that somebody doesn't gain advantage by just showing up with more people or with, you know, better ships or whatever. So this vision that we want to go for is not about ultimate balance. Of course, balance work is involved, but that is only part of what we're doing, and we're not really trying to achieve ultimate balance there. So, next slide. The tactical metagame, just a few more points on further points on that. Yeah, just re-emphasizing that we're not going to completely overhaul, you know, weapon types or defense or logistics or anything like that. We're just mainly looking into, you know, the small tactical variances that we can achieve, which can give these small edges or disadvantages based on your fittings. And of course, you know, I just want to emphasize that despite the stagnation that is a little bit the fact today, this has not always been the case. There are many cases in EVE's history where we saw drastic things happen, usually because CCP did something wrong, you know, released something really unbalanced. But also just when they released something major in these areas, you know, nobody can expect that if he builds an Uber ship today to be able to, for that ship necessarily to be an Uber ship two years down the line. Just like nobody's flying a ship that was Uber 7 years ago or whatever. So we also want to explore a little bit powerful effects with powerful counters, because that can create interesting metagame variations, and, you know, just doing something really powerful is just fun, so why not try to have a little bit of that? But we have to make sure that we mix this with consistency, because if we only focus on powerful effects and powerful counters, we will end up with a very limited rock, paper, scissors system where, you know, rock will always beat paper and so on. So, but if we add consistency to the mix, it means that the choice for the player becomes sort of choosing between, do I want to go for something really powerful which can make me, you know, trust somebody completely but makes me also limited, or do I want to go for something more consistently good? And, you know, just want to emphasize again that we're not promising that a given tactic or setup will always work 100% the same. Sure, it's not great that a battle can be decided before the first shot is fired based on the fittings of the participants, but it is a sort of a necessary evil to keep the tactical landscape fresh. And but of course we have to make sure that not every battle is decided that way. So before leaving the theory section, I want to sort of quickly go through a few sort of grander things that touch upon more than just the module work, but because the roadmap or vision that we are laying out for the modules have to take those facts into account. And we'll start with the perpetual machine. This basically, you know, should be familiar to most players. You harvest stuff, you use that stuff to manufacture something, and then that stuff gets destroyed fighting over more resources. That's the idea, at least. And this is sort of the core of allowing Eve to sort of chug along for all eternity, so to speak, if all is going well. And but we have to be very mindful that these three pillars are relatively balanced, and that if one of these pillars start to be unbalanced, it will sort of clog the whole machine. If, for instance, not enough things are being destroyed, that will, you know, lessen demand, and that means, you know, fewer people are manufacturing, and that means lower demand for resources and so on. So it can become a vicious cycle that we want to avoid, and we have to be very careful about how the state of this machine, because there are kind of a lot of sort of artificial things can hide problems with it. For instance, a constant influx of new players will drive up demand, but it's sort of an artificial demand, because the moment the influx of new players stops, that artificial demand will disappear, and the underlying problems will show through. But this basic system is why we can say that Eve has no end game, because this is a cyclical machine. It goes in cycles. It's not a linear machine. So, and we basically want to do the same for modules, that there's a cyclical life to them. And how this regards to module work is that we should try to make modules that encourage conflict and thus spur economic activity. Just a few other things I want to mention as sort of things that we are looking into trying to improve. This, of course, is not something that we can or want stop entirely. I mean, it should always be favorable to be well organized and have a lot of friends. But we definitely don't want that to be too powerful, because that undermines the whole tactical landscape. I mean, if me just bringing, 1,000 people will always counter more than what ships or fittings people are using. It just makes the tactical landscape of modules meaningless. So here I'm sort of basically claiming that this is something that needs to improve. People can probably disagree to that, but this at least is my opinion, that we should try to increase interactivity, and it should not just be a question of showing up and activating everything on whatever your FC tells you to, and that there is nothing more than that to it. And finally, I think that we also want to try to improve is module variations. Currently, meta levels have been very limited in how basically how they're set up. They basically only are more powerful versions of the lower meta levels. They are either have more powerful effects or lower cap use or whatever. So currently the only question when you're thinking of a particular module group to fit, the only question now is, A, do I have a good meta level to use here, and B, am I willing to risk that module? But we want to add C, where does that meta level module fit the strategy that I'm going for? And finally, I want to mention the 3 creeps, which we have to be very mindful of when we are when we start to add new modules and stuff like that into the game on a regular basis. The first is the power creep. This should be very familiar to you from most other MMOs, where things just get more and more powerful, and it basically makes earlier stuff useless. We don't want that. Complexity creep, by just adding stuff to the game, regardless of, even if it's very simple, it's just more stuff to learn about. And finally, number creep. It's just more things to keep track of, and eventually, if numbers become high enough, trying to figure out some tactical fitting, it just becomes so chaotic and so much noise, basically, that you just throw something together and hope for the best. So this is something that we are definitely looking into trying to keep in check. And sort of underlying problem or issue here is that EVE, of course, is now in its 9th year, and for all old games it becomes increasingly tricky to make sure that we keep veteran players happy, but also keep the game accessible to new players. You can look at games like EverQuest 1, which is older than EVE. It's in its 13th year right now, I think. And they've added a lot of stuff to the game and managed to keep their sort of core audience happy. There are still a fair number of people playing that game, but the game has become so complex and so basically, and the power creep so massive that it's just almost impossible to start that game from scratch. And we don't want that to happen to EVE. We want to continue to cater to the existing player base, of course, but not to the extent where the game becomes inaccessible to new people. So, a lot of talking. I just want to summarize this very quickly. We want to regularly update the game with module changes and additions. create a fluid tactical metagame where module value is relative instead of fixed. We want combat to become more fun and engaging, and we want to develop things slowly and deliberately, because this is such a important part of the game that we don't want to screw it over. I mean, we can sort of get away with launching a feature that turns out to be not so good, because people can then just ignore it and not use it. But if we start to screw around with the core things of the daily experience of most players, we don't have that luxury. So, part 2, what actually are we doing? And so we took all these ideas and all these notions and all these concepts for what we wanted to achieve, and started by just looking at what is the situation right now. You know, how are the module groups faring? Which modules are good? Which modules are not good? Which modules are broken? And so on. And for this, this is an ongoing project. It's not something we are going to finish in a few weeks. It's going to take us a few months to sort of just nail down exactly how things are and create a roadmap from that. But for this first release, the Inferno release, we still wanted to sort of show that something was going on, and so we decided to do a vertical slice sort of things that we are looking into, not do a complete overhaul of anything, but more of just sort of a little bit of most things. And this helps us in identifying, you know, how fast can we churn this stuff out, how long is the development process, and is there some tool work required, and all this stuff. A big part of what we'll be doing is just collecting data and ideas, and here we have been very careful with trying to sort of get input from as many as possible, and part of it is using the in-house data collecting methods that we have, which I'm glad to say we are improving massively right now, which is very good and about time, some would say. But also just brainstorming and idea gathering from everybody. I had a forum thread in the ideas sections, and it's up to, I don't know, 40 pages or something, or 30 something, and a lot of good stuff in there, and from a lot of people, and I've basically gathered massive Excel sheets full of ideas and possibilities. But all this work can be broken down into 2 main avenues. It's fixing existing stuff and adding new stuff. On the fixing existing stuff front, it's underperforming modules and module groups. Here I'm thinking about stuff like cap batteries and passive targeting and ECCM and stuff like that. Technically broken modules like defender missiles and such. Unbalanced module variations. These are basically, there are some cases of there not being a good enough balance between the meta levels, and some meta level, not necessarily the highest one, being just clearly better than the rest. And general balance work, which usually then results from us having done something wrong. On the adding new stuff front, we want to fill in missing module tactical gaps. That means, sort of identify what tactics and counter tactics are there in there right now, and where is sort of missing gaps in that. For instance, not all the weapon types have damage amplifiers. Missing meta levels. This is not a critical issue, but something that we should look into fixing, and then with the diversity and flexibility in mind, instead of just making a more powerful version. Add tactical variations. These are basically new ways to do things that you could do before, but just do it a little bit differently. New tactical dimensions is then something completely new that you couldn't do before. New roles, this of course will mostly happen through ships as in the past, but we definitely want to try to rope module work in there also. And support further existing roles and clarify them and all those things. So, what is happening in Inferno? As I said, we're doing a vertical slice. A quick disclaimer, first off. This, of course, is still something that is being worked on, so take everything with a little bit of a grain of salt. But maybe another disclaimer is oh yeah, there's I think one more here. Names, I'll just place all the names. But another disclaimer not listed here is that when I'm talking about modules mostly, but of course this applies to other items as well, rigs, drones, deployables, ammo, stuff like that. So basically everything except ships. So if we start with the new modules that we are working on right now, first is a tactical warp. This would be an example of a tactical variation. People can already, through probes and cloaked scouts, do similar things, but this is basically a non-targeted, very fast warp. It is almost instantaneous, just directly forward-facing. The use case for this is mostly to help you get engaged. It's not thought of as an escape mechanism. I'm not saying it can never be used as an escape mechanism, but that's not the main use case. And we want to use the spool up, high reactivation time, and the fact that it can't be stopped by warp scramblers and bubbles. So to sort of counter it. We're also adding one more disruption field. This bubble has a very large radius, but it only stops the tactical warp. But the other deployables will also stop the warp. So this is just sort of an extra option on that. I mentioned that some weapon types didn't have damage amplifiers. Drones are one example of it. Whoa, that was fun. Yeah. So, yeah. There's a lot of stuff that we want to do with drones. This is sort of just the first step there. This is a mouthful of a name, but basically what it does is that this is an activatable module that gives you a base resistance bonus that starts out as equal over the line amongst the damage types, but it cycles on each cycle, which currently is like 10 seconds, but don't take all the numbers with a grain of salt. It basically calculates based on the damage it had received and shifts the resistances based on that. So if you've been receiving a lot of kinetic damage, then your kinetic resistance is going to go up. But it's a zero-sum system, so the others will go down correspondingly. Fueled shield booster. This is basically a shield booster that gives a nice shield boost, but has a high cap use. But you can choose whether you want to fuel it from the capacitor or from a charge in the cargo hold. And this is also sort of a design space that we are exploring that we can do a lot with, but we sort of just want to start with this and see where it takes us. Finally, target breaker. This is basically you activate this and it can break targets on you, but the chance of that happening is based on how many people are targeting you. If there are only 1 or 2 people, there's a very low chance of this working, but if there are like 20 people targeting you, you have a very good chance of basically breaking target on all of them. And this is sort of an exploration into affecting fleet fights and trying to, spread the tactical decisions around. We're making a couple of edits to existing modules. First, we're giving a little bit of love to cap batteries. They now also act as counters to nozzles and neuts. This has a stacking penalty, but there is a chance if somebody uses a nozzle or a neut on you that it will actually reflect back on him. And we just to make sure we don't want to make this so powerful that it upsets the balance of cap warfare as it stands right now. But we want to add this as an extra option, which then opens the door for us to do something more for nozzles and neuts in the future. Just as I talked about earlier, the tactics and counter-tactics and the arms race that goes on between those. The other is tracking disruptors. We have to make them a little bit more universally effective against more weapon types. Yeah, so they affect missiles now also. Then a couple of new rigs. One is actually just based on something that exists already. We have the ionic field projector, which increases max targeting range. But we want to make an extreme version of that, basically. This would only be small, but would give, I think the ionic field projector gives something like plus 25% right now. We would be like tripling that or something like that. And, the use case is basically frigate snipers, looking at how that pans out. But this is another design space that we want to explore a little bit, which is the concept of extreme rigs, which are basically rigs that give massive bonuses but also have massive penalties, and see how those function. The other new rig is increasing CPU output. Again, the numbers there are placeholder numbers, but this is how it exists right now on our test servers. These would be both Tech 1 and Tech 2 versions for small, medium, and large size. And yeah, this is just our exploration into expanding a little bit the fitting options for players. Finally, a couple of new drones. First is actually just a version of an existing drone. And yeah, we already have the heavy version, but here we're getting a lighter medium version, of course, with reduced stats. And the other is a salvage drone. And the thinking here, or this is basically the concept we're going for right now, that you can't automate them. You have to always target them to one rack at a time, and they always have to return to dump their stuff into you. Actually, I'm going to steal the thunder from Art a little bit and showing you the concept they have for the salvage drone. This is looking pretty sweet. They're showing it also in their art panel, I think, but they're showing a lot of stuff, so they won't mind me showing one thing. One final slide I wanted to do here is on the seeding of this new stuff. We've sort of been a little bit sloppy on this in the past, and just thrown them on the market. But I want to sort of expand the horizon there. So unless it's based on an existing or very similar item, we're never going to use the NPC market. It also means that there are going to be no BPOs for these items. Again, there are exceptions, but this applies for most of them. And we're sort of looking into different ways of seeding stuff into the game. We're probably not going to use all of these methods right in Incursion, in Inferno, sorry, but we want to sort of start spreading this around and make the acquisition of the BPCs more of a gameplay element. And so just sort of a quick blurb on the future. We, of course, have a huge list of stuff to go through. I'm not going to list any of them here because I don't want to make false promises on anything that might happen. There's a lot of good ideas that have been compiled from many sources, and step one, of course, is compiling all this stuff. Step two is harvesting it and filtering it and prioritizing it, and that is an ongoing work. But I definitely intend to use the CSM and hopefully the players also in helping out with that, and because we're not creating this in isolation. We have to be working on this with the current status of the game and wishes of the players in mind. Yeah, so one final point here about themed expansions or seasons, which is sort of a dream that we can hopefully achieve sometimes in the near future. I'm going to actually talk a little bit about similar things. I talked about the 3 creeps earlier: the power creep, the number creep, and the complexity creep. And we're sort of toying around with a few ideas of how we can deal with this in the long run. And one idea we were toying with is phasing basically modules in and out of existence. This can be done in several different ways. There can be a soft transitions like BPC stop and drop, or hard transitions, which are definitely, of course, more forceful, but also sort of more clear-cut. We're sort of just exploring what we can do here, and just to make sure this only applies to new stuff that we're doing, this or new modules that we're doing. This does not affect existing stuff at all. We're never going to take away items that you already have. So yeah, I was talking about the seeding earlier. This sort of ties into why we are exploring the seeding. It's to give us this control of what is available and what not. So, and that sort of dovetails nicely with the themed expansions I was talking about. So we can have the winter of cap warfare or whatnot, just based on what we are focusing on in that given season or period. And but again, the roadmap for all of this is still in being created, so I can't show you the finalized list of what we're going to do. But I think we just wanted to sort of give you a quick snapshot of what's going on. So yeah, just want to remind you that the roundtable for modules is today at 5 o'clock. So until then, you can, I don't know, spend your time watching the EVE keynote or some boring stuff like that. But I think we have time for some Q&A. What's the time, by the way? Okay, so we have maybe a time for a few questions. I think that's all. So, thank you. Yeah, we're gonna line up. If you want to ask a question, you can line up. Maybe, I think we're doing it over here, right? Yeah, there's a mic here, a microphone here for questions. stand on the stage, okay?
So yeah, hi. Hello. Okay. It's not really well, it's more just a question. What's your take on yeah.
I can't say anything.
I'm gonna tell a little louder, sorry. What would be your take on local scrambling modules? Something that would scramble you out of the local channel, that we're working with a cloaking device or something similar. And just an idea we've been thinking about for the past few months. It's just an idea.
Something about local channel, that's...
Yeah, just scramble. You basically cloak your scouts, make your scout unavailable.
Taking away the local channel. We have been discussing this, not necessarily from a new module, but basically just something that we might want to do by default. But there has been no decision made on that. I mean, there are a few areas that I know a lot of people are annoyed by, but it's also something that other people rely on, so we don't want to, cater to one part just to step on the toes of others. Another example is AFK cloaking, which is an area also that a lot of people want something done with, but another part doesn't want anything to do with it, so we're just stepping lightly there. But I would say, so I can't give you a definite answer on what will happen with the local channel, but there has been some discussion in-house of options that we have there. Okay, yeah, no more time, so we're out of time. Sorry, guys. Hope to just see you at the roundtable. Thank you.